Great. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Christy Scanlon, and I work in the Career Center at Grand Valley State University. And we are happy to have you here today for our session called STARR Interview Responses. This session is part of the Work Like a Laker conference, which is taking place through March 18th. We have a variety of workshops, professional development sessions, and industry-specific sessions, all to help prepare you for our virtual career and summer job fair. That is taking place on March 18th. We will share much more information about the Work Like a Laker conference, upcoming sessions, and the virtual career fair throughout the presentation. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and get started. We have a few updates that we want to share with you. First, I want to ask that as you are comfortable, we ask that you have your video camera on. If for any reason makes you feel uncomfortable, we will not force that. You are more than welcome to have your camera off. However, we all like to see each other and engage, so it's nice to have that video camera on. We do ask that you keep your sound off, that you keep yourself on mute throughout the session. That just helps with background noise. However, if you have a question throughout the presentation and you would like to verbally ask that, you are certainly allowed and invited to unmute yourself and verbally ask the question. My role in the presentation today is I will be monitoring the chat. So if you are more comfortable putting a question you have in the chat, I am happy to ask those and present those to our speakers today. One last quick update. I want to go ahead to the next slide, Lisa. I want to share that we have some great prizes that we are raffling off as part of our Work Like a Laker conference. Our wonderful employer, Consolidated Electrical Distributors, is supporting and sponsoring this prize pack, and it's this very tech-savvy prize package that includes a tripod to hold your mobile device, some chargers, a really cool selfie light. We also have the Career Center Padfolios and some screen wipes. So I am going to drop the check-in link in the chat, and I ask that you take just a moment to fill that out. Well, let me find the link. To fill that out with just your name and your email. That is a great way for us to know who is here, and that is where we will be pulling names for the prize raffle. So that form is now in the chat. You can go ahead and click on that. I will add that multiple times throughout the session. So if you don't do it right now, you will be invited and asked to do that again. Again, it's a great way for us to know who was here and who was participating, and you get a chance to win a great prize as well. So with that, we can move right into introductions. So here's who you have with you today, a great team of professionals. So again, my name is Christy Scanlon. I work in the Career Center. We also have my friend and colleague, Lisa Orlando, who also works with me in the Career Center. And we have a wonderful employer partner, Michael Reygaert from Lake Michigan Credit Union. Lisa and Michael have put together a wonderful presentation about STARR interview responses. So I'm going to pass it off to Lisa.
Thank you, Christy. We're going to get started first and foremost by identifying what the STARR acronym stands for. S is the situation. This is where you set the stage for the story around the challenge that you face. The T describes the task or your role or level of responsibility in the situation. A is the action taken, and it's important that you focus on using the word I when sharing what you did to address the situation. The first letter, R, is results, which is the outcome, and it answers the question, how well did this work? And that second letter, R, is the reflection. And this step is important to share what you learned from the situation. Using this technique when behavioral-based questions are asked during an interview demonstrates specific and concrete examples of your skills, as well as creates an easy-to-follow story with clear conflict resolution and reflection of personal and professional growth. Part of your job during the interview is to be an active listener so that you can determine when a behavioral-based question is being asked so that you can respond using the STARR technique. Let's look at some examples and keywords to help you identify when a behavioral-based question is being asked. Describe a time when your team or company was undergoing some change. How did that impact you? And how did you adapt? Tell me about a time when you had to work with a difficult customer. Give me an example of a time when you were able to be creative with your work. What was exciting or difficult about it? Have you ever had to make an unpopular decision? How did you handle that? This is your moment to show the recruiter or the interviewer how you work and resolve challenges in the workplace versus just telling them what you do. Now let's take a moment to imagine that you are on an interview and you've been asked to describe a time when you faced a difficult problem at work. This is how one individual responded using the STAR method. I was working as a retail manager at a department store during prom season. A customer purchased a dress online and had it delivered to the store. One of my associates accidentally put the dress out on the floor where another customer immediately purchased it. I knew I needed to make this right for the customer to meet my own service level standards and to uphold the reputation of the company. Before calling the customer to let her know about the mistake, I located the same dress at another store location nearby. I ordered it to be pressed and delivered to her home the morning of prom, along with a gift card to thank her for understanding. The customer was so thankful, she wrote a 5-star review on several different review sites. Reflecting on this situation helped me understand the importance of remaining calm and applying critical thinking skills to address customer concerns. So if you think this is a good response to a behavioral-based question, you can use your reaction icons to put a thumbs up or clapping hands on your profile right now. We will take a look at another question next. Behavioral questions evaluate how you've handled situations in the past and what would you do if you were faced with a similar situation again in the future. So let's take another look at a STAR response to this question. When have you had to make a split-second decision? How do you react under unexpected pressure? This was the situation. Working on a project with 3 other team members, we were asked to develop a presentation for new employees. It was my job to create the slide deck. I created a Google document for everyone on the team to upload their information. We completed the project on time, and the HR manager was very impressed with our work. Thinking about this project makes me proud of being part of the team. So do you think this example is as strong as the last example? And I'm going to tell you why this one is not as strong, because the response uses the word we, and it leaves out that critical thinking and problem-solving skills that the interviewer is looking for. So like everything in life, practice is the best way to gain confidence when you're generating these gold star standard responses. The more that you reflect on situations that you've encountered throughout your career, the more detailed of a STAR response you will be able to provide. There are 3 key things to remember about STAR responses, and those include being thorough, thoughtful, and concise. Remember to include that second R, or the reflection piece, because what you learned from this experience demonstrates that you are intentional about self-improvement and self-discovery. Now let's have some fun and answer a couple of questions using the chat. The first question is, what does the second letter R in the STAR acronym stand for? We're going to be using our active listening skills here. So if you want to go ahead and put those in the chat. And the next question we're going to look at is, as an active listener during an interview, what type of question would be asked that could be answered using the STAR response? So think about that and drop that answer or response in the chat. Christy, do we have some chats coming through?
Yes, and they are correct. Behavioral is the correct answer. Good job, everybody.
Very good. Excellent active listening skills, everybody. I appreciate that. And learning, you've now put it into long-term memory because you wrote it out. So excellent job.
And now they're coming through with behavioral. So good job, everybody.
Thank you. The Career Center team is here for all of you, and we have several resources for students to connect. The virtual career lab is hosted in Blackboard. We have Handshake for scheduling remote Zoom and phone appointments. And you can have your resume reviewed simply by emailing it to careers@gvsu.edu. And Christy, if you want to drop that link in the chat, that'd be great. I appreciate your attention this afternoon, and I'm excited to have Michael from Lake Michigan Credit Union here to share the employer perspective. Mike has been with Lake Michigan Credit Union since 2014 and currently serves as the Human Resources Manager. He has his bachelor's degree from Western Michigan University with a focus in human resource management, and has his master's degree from Michigan State University in management, strategy, and leadership. He has his SHRM SCP certification in HR and is also on Lake Michigan Credit Union's Wellness Committee. In his free time, Mike enjoys spending time with his family and cherishing moments as a new dad. He also enjoys hiking, running, and visiting national parks. With that, it's all yours, Michael.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending. I'm glad you all are here with us. If you have questions as I'm going through any of my pieces, please feel free to interrupt. You can unmute your mic, speak up. If you want to raise your hand. I think Christy's watching the chat, so if you have questions, please ask. I'm here to answer any of your questions. So for my section, I wanted to cover some other pieces that you should know aside from the interview itself. Things like researching a company pre-interview, how to prepare for a virtual interview, what not to do in a job interview, and it really could apply to in-person or virtual settings. A golden rule that I have, and I'll get to that when we go through it, why you may consider LMCU for employment, and then any questions at the end if you have any that you maybe didn't ask during my presentation. All right, so what should you research about a company? So I put some bullets here that I thought would be important to share. The first one, culture. So believe it or not, every organization has its own culture. So that could be company-wide, that could be regionally specific to a geographical location they have. A good example is LMCU has locations in Michigan. We have locations in Traverse City, the east side of the state of Metro Detroit, West Michigan, the Lakeshore, and actually now we're in Florida as well, where it's very different. So in Florida, there's a lot of individuals that make up the community there that are, they speak Spanish. So they're Hispanic or maybe Cuban population. We don't have that as much here in West Michigan. So that's kind of what I say, when culture can be very different depending on where you're at. But every organization has their own, and it's important to know that. Mission, vision, values. So these are three things that I would highly encourage everybody to learn about for any organization they're considering for a couple reasons. So one, you'll impress them when you're in an interview. You always want to know kind of what you're stepping into as you're doing an interview. It's somewhere you want to work. So for yourself, does it align with some of the values you have for yourself? Believe it or not, there will be times when you maybe consider a job where you find out they don't quite align. And from the outside, it may seem like it's something you can work with, but I can tell you, if you get there and you find out that they're totally opposite of what you believe in, it can be really difficult to have a job there and to feel like there's meaning in your work at times. So that's really important to know. Stability and financial health. So especially right now in the world of COVID and all the different changes that are happening, I think we hear quite a bit about different industries. You know, you can think of hospitality and tourism. They were hit really hard with COVID, to the point where a lot of them had to lay people off. Other organizations are doing really well. You know, you can think of Meijer. Everybody needs food. It's kind of one of those places, right, that everybody depends on right now. So it's important to know the stability of a company, the financial health. If it's a public company, a lot of times on their website, you can find their financials. Other times you can do a simple Google search and just learn a little bit about their industry and look for like news articles and different things. I know I've done that personally when I've considered different jobs, and that's been really helpful, even not in the world of COVID. So I would definitely encourage that. So that gets kind of into the next bullet with industry, how the company makes money. So a good example is LMCU. We're a financial institution or a bank, right? But we're a credit union. And some financial institutions, you know, base their structure off bringing in deposits from members or customers. LMC is very focused on like our mortgage side of our business, and that generates a lot of money for us. That's not the case for every financial institution. So understanding how companies make money is really important. Sometimes it can be equally as important as some of the skills you bring to the company. If you understand their business, it's going to make your work a lot easier. So definitely important to know that. Community involvement. So for some people, that is something I think that a lot of individuals value really highly. Some organizations have a big focus on that, others do not. And that's okay. Some businesses have different models than others, and you're going to find that. But it kind of goes back to the mission, vision, values that organizations have and what you value. Personally, I like to be a part of an organization that's really involved. So I'll touch on that when I speak on LMCU a little bit later. But that's something that's always good to know. Social media channels. So I'm sure a lot of you are involved on social media, probably everybody in some capacity. But there's a lot of good content that you can find out there. It can be things like we as a credit union will post stuff about our products and services. We highlight, employee stories. We talk about our members. You can kind of get a feel for what the company values and some of the things that they communicate externally. One big push that we're doing right now that I think you're probably going to see from a lot of companies is surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are things that I think a lot of students are really passionate about. You can find a lot of that on companies' social media channels and find out, is this a company that values some of the same things I do? I'm not going to lie, when I interview, that's something that I look for. When I came to LMCU, I asked some of those questions. So those are good channels to find some of that out. Sometimes those can be difficult questions to maybe bring up in an interview. So doing it maybe behind the scenes by looking at social media channels, things like that, you can still get the information, but maybe in a way that's not so direct. Company reviews, so sites like Glassdoor can be very helpful to understand several things. So again, reviews on companies. So what do they do well? What are some areas that maybe they have opportunities in? LMCU culture is something that always comes out as a bright spot. One of the opportunity areas is we're an organization that continues to grow significantly. So in my 7 years here, we've doubled in size, and now we have about 1,500 employees. So there's growing pains with certain things. So it gives you some insight to that stuff. You can also find a lot of times even interview questions that are asked. I wouldn't put all your eggs in the basket of, looking at that and thinking, okay, exactly what's on there is exactly what I'm going to hear in an interview. But it does sometimes give you a leg up on some of the things that could be asked. So I would encourage you to take a look there. Who's interviewing you? So this can be a funny one. It's kind of like, are you creeping on the people that are interviewing you, and how much do you want to do that? And I say that jokingly, but some of the things that you could consider are just knowing who your audience is. Are you meeting with somebody that's going to be a peer of yourself? Is it going to be somebody that oversees the entire division you're going to support? I know when I interviewed here, I met with a few peers and my direct manager. Then after that, it went up to a higher level where it was the person that oversaw all of HR for the company. And when you prep for your mindset for when you go into those conversations, it's important to know your audience, because likely they're going to look at things a little bit different. So that's where that can be important. One way I like to do that is actually use LinkedIn as your friend for that. So you have to be careful, because if you log in as yourself and you go search for them, it's going to show on their profile that you searched for them. So that can seem a little creepy. But if you're logged out of your profile and you do maybe like a Google search, you can type in the person's name, and a lot of times you can pull up their LinkedIn profile without it tracking. And the nice thing about that is you get a feel for who that person is. Maybe they went to the same school as you. I remember when I interviewed here, I was just looking to start my master's at MSU, and I saw the person I was interviewing with actually had a degree from MSU themselves. So it was an opportunity to kind of have a conversation during my interview that brought it up. I did it a little bit, not so direct where they knew that's what I was doing, but we were able to bond on a common topic, and it just helped provide a little bit more of a connection in the interview. So it gives you a leg up. Anything you can do to set yourself apart is important. but just be careful on, your approach with that. But there are some ways you can do that, to help yourself. Okay, so virtual interview platforms. So Lisa put a bunch of options here, and I think there's 10. So really the gist of this slide is to show, in the climate we're in, a lot of things are happening virtual today, not in person, right? We're doing this virtually. So there's a lot of different methods. You can see Zoom, Google Meet, GoToMeetings, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, Skype, all these different options. LMCU uses VidCruiter, and we actually use that to conduct video interviews. And that can be either in real time where there's one of us and then one of you on the other end, or it could be a link that we send you with questions and you're in there recording your response, just looking at a screen. It can be awkward. We had a lot of debate when we implemented that, if it was going to be received well by candidates. It has been received well, but if you've never done that, it can be a little bit different. So, I think the gist here is just to show there's a lot of different offerings. And when you're considering interviewing, how does that look virtually compared to when you're in person? Are you considering how you appear in the video offering? So are you dressing from head to toe appropriately? Or are you just dressing from like your head, to maybe your belly button? What does that look like? And believe it or not, there's a lot of different ways that companies use that software. So I can tell you, when we were doing our research, and there were some offerings that would have you take your camera, whether it was your phone, your computer, your iPad, whatever it may be, and you had to scan the entire room, top to bottom, tilted every way. So if you thought you'd have your PJs on the bottom half and your dress shirt on the top half, you kind of made a mistake in that interview. So it's just really important to make sure when you're going through these that you're treating them as an in-person interview, and applying a lot of the same logic, because you just never know. So we can go to the next one here. So how to prepare for a virtual interview. So this kind of builds off the last slide, but I wanted to hit on some points that I thought were important, some of the things that I commonly see as mistakes with people as we're doing virtual interviews. And honestly, a lot of this can even go beyond interviewing. It could be even how you have a virtual meeting at a place of work or professional association you're a part of. A lot of this applies. But for the intent here, we'll focus on the virtual interview. So test out your Wi-Fi. I think a lot of times we take that for granted and think, my Wi-Fi works all the time, it'll be great. As we were prepping for this, I think Lisa shared, I pulled up the slide and my computer's freezing. And, we were kind of joking about it, but those are things to think about. When I was prepping today, I closed my email, I closed my other browser, because it slows that stuff down. So it's important to test those things before you go into an interview. I think the last thing anybody's going to want is to say, my Wi-Fi is sketchy, I keep going in and out, I can't hear you. Chances are the employer is going to work with you on that. But if you can avoid that, that works in your favor. So that's the first thing. Second, download software, apps, test it several times. So just recently, I was going for my next level of my HR certification, and I had an exam I had to take the next morning. And my iPad didn't work at home for the software that needed to be downloaded. So I had my work computer, and I thought, no problem, I can get it downloaded on there. It's like 10 o'clock at night. And I tried downloading it and realized that we have access set up where an administrator has to do that on my behalf. And my test was at 8 a.m. the next morning. So not an interview, but that kind of sucked to be in that spot, right? So I ended up on the phone with our help desk. They were helping me with that for a couple hours. And then I had this test the next morning. So it just put me in a really uncomfortable spot and trying to get some sleep for my test the next day. And you don't want to be in a spot like that for an interview. So it's just really important that you download those things ahead of time and make sure they work. Arrive a few minutes early. So similar to an in-person interview, it's always good to be there ahead of time, not too early. Sometimes, we have people that show up when COVID was not going on, really early, to the extent of like an hour. And it's like, we may have other interviews going on, we may have, other meetings, and it kind of puts pressure on the employer. Like, okay, this person is here, we don't want to keep them waiting in the lobby, but at the same time, it's like you could have avoided that by maybe being, 5, 10, 15 minutes early, maybe at most, and then that way you show that you're on time, you're actually early, but you're not too early where it's maybe placing a burden on the employer. So I think that's really important to know. Dress as if you're in person. So we talked about that a little bit, but if you're virtual, I would treat it as you're in person, and dress up. You never know the software they're going to have. So I always say, be on your game with your appearance. Find a clean and well-lit room. So that can seem one that also seems like common sense. I turn on the light, it's fine in here. But believe it or not, different rooms and different settings will look different on your computer. So, we have a team that does a lot of training for staff, and they actually bought like these lights that they put around their desktop or their laptop or behind them, and it kind of lights up the room. I'm not saying you have to do all that for an interview, but make sure where you're at is well lit. They can see you. You're not like Casper kind of going in and out of the picture a little bit. You want to make sure that they can see you as you're doing your interview. Eliminate distractions. So on this photo to the right, I had a dog on this woman's lap. And I say eliminate animals, crying babies, loud noises. I have a toddler at home, so I know what it's like to have a baby in the background. I have a golden doodle who thinks he's a little dog, but he's like 70 pounds and loves to be on my lap during meetings. So I get that all of that can be something you have to deal with. But when you're trying to sell yourself in an interview, you're trying to land a job, there may be several other people, that are coming in before or after you. And little things like that can make a difference, because, you may have that going on, but it's if we hire you professionally wise at work, are you going to let those things impact your work? Is that always going to be a distraction? Maybe not. Maybe it was just that situation you had at home, but it's important to show that you can be in a setting where all those are out of the picture. Focus on the camera. So I've probably not done a super great job even of that in here, but all of you are on the right of my screen, but my camera's in the middle. So as we talk through interviewing, that's something to make note of. Maybe every so often looking directly at your camera versus the people on the screen, because it is different. So that's just something to kind of mentally be prepared for. Be authentic. So, there's things where candidates will come in virtual or in person. They'll do all this prepping, they'll prep, and they try to anticipate all the questions that are going to be asked, and they're like a robot. Well, who are you talking to? You're not talking to a computer. I mean, maybe if you're doing a virtual interview that's recorded, but at the end of the day, you're talking to other people. So, are you going to talk to your friend like they're a robot? Probably not. You're just having a conversation with them. So I always tell people, be authentic, be genuine, and give the responses that reflect who you are. Because if you're going to work out good for that company and if they're a good fit for you, why not be yourself and know that you're comfortable there? If you pretend to be something you're not, you're going to get there and find out you're probably not going to enjoy it. So I always tell people to be authentic, and that way both sides can get a feel for if it's going to work or not. Avoid winging it. So when I was in undergrad, I took this approach a lot, not going to lie. Didn't really work out well for me. So it's pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of items on here and stuff that we've talked about, that is important to make note of. And something so simple like testing out Wi-Fi or dressing appropriately, researching a company. I've made many mistakes not doing that in the past. And I went in there not prepared to ask questions or know how to respond to a question. So I always say avoid winging it. You definitely want to prepare. Follow up. So this is something that I don't always see from people that are interviewing for jobs, especially with us and other organizations. I'm sure it's the same thing. But a personalized letter, a follow-up is really important. Sometimes I know somebody will be like walking out the door and I'll see them on their phone and they're sending their thank you letter. I'm not saying that. I'm saying maybe a day or so after, following up, saying, I really enjoyed the interview. Here were some things that I took away from it. And I could really see myself here based on, these reasons. Personalize it. You had a conversation with somebody, you got to know them, they got to know you. You found some stuff out about the company that you probably liked. That's stuff to point out. If your experience can tie into something they say, reiterate that. I'm sure the Career Center probably has even some templates that would help with some of that. But it's really important. I remember we had someone in one of our teams here when I was helping interview them. They followed up with a personalized card, and the card was actually of a photo they took when they were at a park, like a national park. And I thought that was the coolest thing because they had this personalized letter, and it wasn't even a store-bought card. Like they went to the extent of actually making their own. And that was like 5 years ago. And that just stuck with me, and I still have it at my desk. So it's just little things like that you're kind of going the extra step, and maybe that'll set you apart. Maybe it won't. And some employers may not even like that. But I think most will find that as something you're doing to set yourself apart. What not to do in a job interview. So this will apply again a lot in person or virtual. And actually, this was a list I found on Indeed. So I want to give them credit with the source here at the bottom. And you could always look this up yourself, but they had a really good list, and I thought this applied. So I wanted to share it here. So their top items were being arrogant. So thinking you know it all, I would definitely avoid that. There's a difference between being confident in what you're able to do and just going in there thinking you know everything, and just answering, yep, I already know that. Oh yeah, I can definitely do that. Explain what you can bring and show, that you've demonstrated the ability to do that. So there's a different way, you could come off there. Avoiding eye contact. So this is really funny, but well, not funny, but this happens. So I have a team that reports to me, and they're all women. And a lot of times I'll interview with them, and somebody will be in there interviewing, and they'll just look at me the whole time. And they won't make any eye contact to the women on my team. And they leave that interview feeling so disrespected. Like, why did they only look at you? Why wouldn't they look at me? Do they have an issue with women? Maybe not. Maybe that's not the case. But that can sometimes be a perception that's given off. And it could go the other way too. Maybe they just looked at the women in there and I didn't get any eye contact. Or maybe neither of us got eye contact. And we've had that before where they're looking at the ceiling, they're looking down, at their shoes or something. It's just really awkward. You're trying to make a connection with this person that you're in the interview with, and it's somebody you're likely going to be working with. So just think on a normal basis, do you want to interact that way? Probably not. So that's something to be mindful of. Being late, too early. We talked on those. Lying. So it seems pretty obvious there, but I do think there are several times where candidates will overstate what they're able to do. And believe it or not, it'll come out eventually. So, you may say, I've done all this. Oh yeah, I can definitely do that. Maybe you're saying that so you get the job, but then you get there and it's like, oh shoot, I can't do any of this. So it may not come out in day one. It may not come out that first year, but eventually it's going to come out. And that's going to be an issue. So it's something to be mindful of when you're going into those. Dress inappropriately. So we talked about that a little bit, but my rule of thumb there is if you're ever questioning what to wear, it's always better to dress up. So sometimes companies won't give you a dress code. They'll just say, show up to the interview at this time. Here's our location. Here's who you're meeting with. Nothing else. We do that to some degree. And there's nothing about how you should dress. Well, some people show up in jeans. I've had other people show up actually in their work outfit from another financial institution, which I can tell you as an employer that's competing with them, that is like, you're probably automatically disqualified at that point. And, so those are things that are just really important. I had another person show up from Denny's and they just got working and they smelled like the grill that they were working on all day. There's things like someone just got done smoking before they came in, and someone on our team may not, that may affect them a certain way. So there's things like that you just want to be mindful of. Again, if you're around your friends, your family, are those things, I don't know, those are just things that I always tell people to be really mindful of. Fidgeting. So I've had a lot of experience with people, hands in their pocket, they may be playing in their purse, a bag they brought. You don't really want to do that because it's like, where's your attention? Is it with me or is it with what you have going on in there? A big one that I don't know if it's on here, but it does say answer your phone. But a lot of times I see fidgeting being, oh shoot, I had a text message that came through and it just went off, or somebody called me. That's like a interview 101. Like, you don't want to even have your phone in there with you, really, because it just helps avoid that. So that kind of gets to the one of answering your phone. But I've had people do that. I've had someone answer a phone and be on like a 5-minute conversation in the interview with me, and they said, can you hold just a second? I can tell you we didn't go forward to that person. And that's like the only thing I thought about the entire interview, was just how I was treated and essentially disrespected in there. So, again, that's something to think about. When I would interview, I actually would leave my phone in the car, or if you absolutely have to bring it with you, I power off my phone and then throw it in my pocket. So that way, 100% it's not going to go off. Those are things to think about prior to going into your interview. If it's virtual, you may be home or wherever, but same thing, leave it in another room. Personally, my preference is just to turn it off, because even if it's in another room, you may not remember where the volume setting's at. Could be super loud, and you hear stuff. So that's my recommendation with that one. Show a lack of accountability. So that's one, that you want to show you're dependable, that they can count on you. Those are things probably too that even in your questions, if you're doing like a behavioral based interview, you could show some of that. What were some of the results? What were you responsible for? Did you drop the ball on a project, or were you the one that really took ownership for that? That's something that can be highlighted. Checking the time in an interview. That's also one where it's kind of like, do you have somewhere else to go, or am I your 100% focused right now? It's something that seems just kind of like, oh, I'm just going to look at my Apple Watch really quick. Something just came up, and it may just be habit. I'm not going to lie. I have a habit of doing that when I'm with my boss sometimes in her office, and she's like, "Are you here? Or are you on your phone or your watch?" And it's just habit sometimes. So again, it may be something where you just take that off. So then that way, when you're in situations like that, it doesn't come across like you're being disrespectful to the person in there. If it's something where you have a set timeline where you can only be there for an hour because maybe you're interviewing and you have to get back to your job or something, then I would say up front in that interview, say, I have a hard stop in an hour. I know we're scheduled for that time. I do have to get back to my job after this, but I wanted to make time for you guys today to have this conversation. Something like that goes much farther and a long way, than constantly checking the time. Acting desperate. You never want to seem too desperate. Also, another thing with that is eventually you're going to get to the point of them maybe offering you a position. Maybe it's this job, maybe it's a different job, but when you talk about down the road, maybe negotiating salary and those types of things, if you're asking or looking desperate, they're going to know they kind of have you on the hook there, right? Where like you're going to take anything. So they could offer potentially lower because they know you're desperate. Those are things that you may not think about, but your approach, who you're talking to, those are all things, as you're going through the process to keep in mind. Looking angry. So you may not like a question, you may have not responded well, it may not be going well, whatever it may be, but you want to keep your composure. So that's just something, again, you kind of have to be self-aware of how you're reacting, both what you're saying and your nonverbal cues. What you do not say but show can be a big sign too. Crossing your arms, being defensive, coming unprepared, we've talked about that. Looking bored. Believe it or not, we've had people that have interviewed with us that just seem like we're wasting their time, and it's like, I don't care, like you're here to get a job with us, so are you interested or you're not? If you're not interested, I'll move on to another interview where someone's definitely more vested in working for us. I would hope none of you would do that, but that is something that has happened. So just be invested, and maybe you're bored because it doesn't align with your values, or you don't like the culture, and you find that out after it's too late and you're already in the interview. That's why it's important to do some of your homework ahead of time, so you can avoid that. Being rude. So I gave the example of someone on the phone for several minutes. That's a perfect example. You want to avoid those things. Eating. I've had people take out food in the interview. Even people to the extent where like they may have some blood sugar issues where they have to monitor that during the day. You could easily eat probably before you came into the building, or something like that. So there's ways around those things, because I had somebody with that exact situation and then they just started eating during the interview. It's like I was understanding, but at the same time, you probably could have done it just before. So just be mindful of that. Those are things, that tend to come up. Golden rule. So I said I'd get to this, but what I mean by it is if you question it, avoid it. So it's pretty straightforward, but that's just something I've always kind of told myself is if I'm interviewing and I'm questioning, do I dress, only my top half and I'm in PJs in the bottom half? If you're wondering if you should ask something in an interview, but you're like, I don't know if this is inappropriate, honestly, I just say avoid it. And maybe think of another approach, or always, go above, if it's like dressing up, and you're like, maybe I could dress down in jeans. I know LMCU has jean day on Wednesday. Maybe I can do that too. But you're questioning, I don't know as a candidate if I can do that. Don't, dress up, be professional. It never hurts to go the extra mile, but you never want to be the one on the other end. So I always say if you question it, simply just avoid it. So why LMCU? So I know I was asked by Lisa and Christy to share on this a little bit. And instead of putting maybe a bunch of our job openings or even a link on here for that, I wanted to more so highlight going back to the culture piece, mission, vision, values, that type of stuff. And I thought these 4 images really kind of share why I like LMCU, but probably why some of you may want to consider LMCU too. So you'll see on the left, that's a picture of actually some of our staff volunteering, I think, in Grand Haven building a playground. So it just kind of speaks to our community involvement, some of the things as an organization we value. There's a picture at the bottom that lists this basket with a bunch of food and water. And actually when COVID was going on last year, and I know that's still going on, but in 2020, we donated $50 of any mortgage that someone got a loan from LMC with to donate towards a local food bank. Every single time that there was a mortgage that we took, and there were quite a bit that we took last year, $50 every single time went to a local food bank in communities that we were a part of. So, not every organization does that. Not every organization have the means to do that. So again, it's all about, where you want to work, some of the things they may be able to do, what do they value. You may or may not have heard LMCU is actually now the sponsor of what was Fifth Third Ballpark where the Whitecaps play. So it's LMCU Ballpark. Again, I kind of think that shows our commitment to the community, wanting to be involved. There's going to be a lot of events we hold there, graduations. They talked about having, health clinics there. They've talked about having different events where we can really be involved with the community and trying to find ways to use the ballpark in creative ways that maybe haven't been utilized in the past. LMCU Bridge Run. So I think Lisa shared I'm on our wellness committee. So for me, that's something that's really important to have wellness kind of built into the place that I work. And that's something in the community we like to have too, where we have this event every year in September where everyone can participate and walk, run, participate in this community event. And actually from a staff perspective, we have a wellness committee and a lot of different wellness events. When COVID's not going on, we have a health coach that comes in every Wednesday to our corporate offices even, and she does meditation. So we can take breaks and meditate. We've had on-site massages, so some really cool things that may not be everywhere. I think a lot of times, and this gives some insight, not just to LMCU, but as you're looking at a career for LMCU, a lot of times we hear, well, what branch do you work out of? What do you do in the branch? Well, I don't even work in a branch. We have 4 going on 5 corporate offices. And a lot of people think we just have retail positions. And when you think about it, it's like we have HR, we have marketing, we have finance, accounting, we have IT, we have all these different areas. So when you're thinking of an organization, that's where I say do your research, kind of learn about what they have, where their footprint is, because you'll learn a lot. And a lot of times it'll probably surprise you in a lot of the different offerings they have. So whether it's LMCU, we'd love to have you here. But if it's somewhere else too, I think those are just good tips to kind of have in your back pocket. But if you are interested in LMCU, you can always go to lmcu.org/careers. And I think Christy will post a link for that in the chat. But that's one way you could look at our positions right now. If you're ever interested in like an internship, we're not having those right now just with COVID and a lot of our staff being remote. But typically we have internships every semester, winter, spring, summer, fall, and they kind of vary based on what everybody needs department wise. So outside of COVID, you know, you can keep that in your back pocket to think about. And if it's a part-time or full-time role, not internship related, there's a lot of positions even out there now. So just something to think about. But whether that's helpful with us or other organizations, you know, I hope this was like some food for thought as you're thinking about where you want to work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, for all that information. We'll just go through a couple more slides and open it up to questions, but the upcoming career activities for the Work Like a Laker conference, if you're interested, we have a virtual practice interview coming up March 12th, how to use Career Fair Plus March 15th, and leading up to the big virtual career fair on March 18th. So Christy's going to go ahead and put the Work Like a Laker link in the chat for all of you so that you can check out all the different sessions that are being offered. And we're very grateful that you were here with us this afternoon. We understand that it is a day off for the university, so thank you so much for taking time to join us this afternoon. And this is your last chance to check in to be entered in to win that prize. So we'll put that link in the chat one more time. If you haven't had the opportunity to go to that Google form, please do so now, fill it out, complete it. And the email address that you include in that form will be how you will be contacted the week of March 23rd. And we just want to thank our prize sponsor, Consolidated Electrical Distributors, for the awesome prizes, for the tech prizes. And I know Michael mentioned that one of the light rings for the computer, that is one of the prizes. So they do help out a ton. I use it all the time. And now we'll open it up to questions, and I'll stop sharing so I could see everybody's faces.
I just want to add a few things,
Yeah.
if that's okay. So Michael gave a great, Michael and Lisa both shared great tips and information. And I was chuckling a little bit at some of the examples Michael shared about people like answering their phone and can you hold on a minute, like so thank you for sharing those, because I think that people who are in positions like me and Lisa think like, oh, that wouldn't ever really happen, like people wouldn't ever really do that, and they do. And of course they clearly were not Grand Valley students or Grand Valley grads, because the Career Center would have corrected them. But thank you so much for sharing that. In my role in the Career Center, I get to work with employers all the time, and I say this with complete honesty that Lake Michigan Credit Union is definitely one of my favorites. If I didn't work at Grand Valley, I think I'd want to work at LMCU. I think their culture, their organization, what they do with the community is fantastic. As Michael was sharing all of their community engagement, I put in the chat that LMCU is also the lead sponsor for our career internship and summer job fair. So they're great community partners. They're a great employer partner for Grand Valley. This isn't meant to be a plug that y'all should work there. I'm just saying that there's a reason why we asked Michael to do this today, because he is such a skilled HR professional. He's so developmental in working with students. You really got some great tips and information that is just going to put you ahead of all the other applicants out there by knowing this and practicing that. So thank you for doing that. I did kind of blow up the chat a little bit with all of those links for the Work Like a Laker conference, for the virtual practice interviews. All of those are in there. I definitely put in a plug for LMCU/careers. So right now we don't have any questions in the chat, so I think we can open it up if there are any folks who want to be brave and unmute and go ahead and ask.
Including our contact information too, Christy, would be great if anybody wants to reach out to me in the Career Center, or to Michael if they ever have any questions about Lake Michigan Credit Union, or just having that contact. This is what it's all about. The Work Like a Laker conference is about networking, and you showed up today, and that puts you one step ahead of all the others who didn't get this information. So thank you. I think it's just outstanding. And Michael, I can't get over, I love how authentic you were with, I have a question on the crossing your arms during an interview. So what do you say to individuals who are saying, arm placement just folded in front of you, but the crossing the arms is kind of like, yeah, I don't want to be here. It's a sense of nonverbal.
It does. So normally, I don't know, I kind of tell people, well, I don't tell them if they're in the interview because I'm trying to see what they're doing, but for all of you, it's usually just kind of have it natural. Like, how do you normally sit? When I don't want to say sitting on your couch at home because maybe you're laying down or something, but when you're just sitting in a chair at work, how are you usually sitting? Chances are you're probably, or even in class, maybe, I hope you all are sitting normal, but, kind of hands on maybe your lap or on your side, kind of back straight, you don't want to be slouched in the chair. Again, you're trying to make a first impression in most cases. So you only get to do that one time. So it's just something to think about, when you're in those situations. Any questions? Anything I can answer? Happy to help if I can be help in any way.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Madison. Thank you so much for the information you shared with us. I am a senior here at Grand Valley, but I have one more semester coming up in the fall. And I had someone approach me on LinkedIn, and I have no idea, no prior knowledge of the company. I did look at her LinkedIn a little bit because that's how she reached out to me. But I guess my question is, how would you approach an interview like that you weren't necessarily seeking out? And I mainly agreed to keep it with her because I saw it as an opportunity to practice, but she still is like a real person for a real company. So I can't just treat it as like a practice simulation. So I guess, how would you approach that?
Good question. I love this question. So I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of like headhunters or people that are trying to recruit people off LinkedIn. I can tell you myself, I get a lot of these messages like emails or inbox items like on LinkedIn. And I think a lot of us probably do. And sometimes they're just looking for somebody, and they may be really interested in you, or it may be just somebody that's trying to find anybody to fill the role. And I don't want to say that maybe you're not qualified or you don't meet the requirements of the job, but sometimes that's what they're doing. So you kind of have to use your judgment a little bit to figure out, would this be something I want to explore? Is this something maybe I really don't need to respond to? I'll be honest, there's been several that I haven't responded to in the past because you can tell they're just sending it to everybody, to the point where it's like not even addressed to me, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if you're really that interested or if this went to like 100 other people. So there's been some where it's been like, hi, Mike, I have this position. I was looking at your profile. I saw some of the experience you have, maybe, a fit here. I've had before where like someone reached out about being a CEO of a company in like another state. And I'm like, yeah, probably not going to happen, So like, honestly, I didn't even waste my time in responding to them. And I don't want to give the impression that you necessarily shouldn't always respond, but it's going to be up to you to kind of use your judgment a little bit on who you may want to build a connection with, who may be really interested in you versus who's just sending this out to anybody. I don't know if you have Facebook, but it's kind of like when you get those random Facebook or Instagram requests too, and you're like, person's in like India, like how the heck did they even find me, or in a different country that you've never maybe even been to. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to decline that request. I kind of look at it that way too on LinkedIn. If it seems really random and something where it's just like, I don't have a gut, my gut's telling me there's something fishy going on here, I probably wouldn't even respond. So I guess that's my tip of advice, but I think everybody kind of has to, think about that themselves and what kind of impression they want to make there.
All right, thank you so much.
Does that help answer it a little bit for you?
Yeah, from my impression, it seemed like a smaller company and it seemed like a genuine, I can't remember exactly how she initially approached me. So maybe it was more like a mass calling out. So I would have to go back and check it, but definitely not somebody from a foreign country, not for like a weird position like CEO. So yeah, my appointment is actually tonight with her, so I'll probably keep it and just see how it goes. But thank you. That did not cross my mind whatsoever. So that's good information. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think your point about wanting to actually continue with it to even have practice for an interview, I don't want to necessarily always encourage, doing an interview just for the sake of practicing because you are using their time and they're trying to probably find somebody. But if you're interested in a role, and you want to maybe explore it, it doesn't hurt. I think a lot of people do that. Sometimes they'll be contacted and it's like, I wasn't even looking, but maybe it's worth kind of seeing what's out there. So that doesn't hurt. But if you're doing it simply just for practice and that you're probably not even going to consider them, I would maybe caution that just because, they are probably looking for someone and you want to be mindful of their time too.
I just want to quickly add on, Madison, that unfortunately there are a lot of scam jobs out there. So I think that's what Michael was leading to is you just want to make sure it's legit, right? One of the best ways to know it's a scam is if they ask you for money. And they do that in the way of send me $200 and I'll send you a laptop. Nope. So if you're getting at all that sense, you just shut it down right away. Do not send them money. Do not give them your bank account number. I know it sounds unbelievable, but some students do, and non-student, like people fall for that. That's why they're kind of successful at that. So, definitely do some research ahead of time to make sure that it is legit.
And I wasn't trying to pick on just like India either. I was just using them as an example, but it could be any outside of the US,
It could
country.
be Grand Rapids, right? Like they come from
Grand Rapids. And one of the things to point out is like, you can look at their profile too. I mean, there's nothing to say you can't look at it. And sometimes you'll look at their photo and you're like, this looks like it's totally like a fake picture. Like this looks too real to be true. And I would say most people probably, can decipher between a legit profile and a not legitimate profile. So that's why I give the example of Facebook, Instagram, some of those other sites. Because I think we've all probably had some of that at some point where you're like, yeah, this is not a real request or not even somebody I remotely know, so you kind of use your judgment there, but that's how I would look at it.
I want to be cognizant of time. We're at 1:27. So if you need to leave, that is okay. But if you want to stay and continue the conversation, that is probably fine too. We do have a question in the chat about what types of questions do you recommend asking at the end of an interview? Michael, do you want to take that?
I can. And then I think Cindy also had her hand up, so I just don't want to miss her as well.
Sorry, Cindy, you're next.
Awesome. So, it's going to depend. I don't know if there's a set of questions that I would always ask every interview. Some of it's going to be dependent on what you're hoping to learn. So if you're going into an interview and there's something you really were hoping to know, maybe it's, sometimes it's as simple as something like, I don't know what the organization structure is of the department. We're hiring a benefits specialist right now for our HR team. And I was just going through things I want to cover with a candidate in an interview. And one of the things I wanted to make sure they knew was the job. So giving them a copy of the description, which is something you can ask for if you haven't seen that. What the organization structure is. So like, who do you report to? What's my team look like? My wife, she had a job where she's not somebody that can be sitting in a basement, not having any sunlight. It's kind of depressing, right? So her last job, it was very much that, and she didn't enjoy being at work. So she has a job now where she has an office. She actually is out of the office most of the time when she does work, but it provided some sunlight and she had a window. So one of the questions she knows now that she's always interested in knowing is, what does my work environment look like? So some of it, as you're going from job to job, and I'm not saying job hop, but as you make career changes, throughout your time, you'll kind of learn some of the things that you're going to want to be more mindful of, when you do make a change. Things I will maybe caution, I'll take this a little different direction too, are asking questions like, so how much am I going to get paid for this role? Just like blatantly asking something like that. I can tell you it's something that everybody wants to know. And at some point you're going to know that. I would caution if it's one of maybe your first jobs ever, or you're just starting out outside of school, maybe you're not as interested in trying to negotiate and asking for everything, but maybe you're just at that point trying to land a job that's the right fit for you, where you can build your experience, grow professionally. And when they get to the point of an offer, if they value you, there's going to be probably a fair offer. If it's something where it's like, this seems like really out of line, you're probably not even questioning that right on the spot. Usually what I see is the candidate will take some time and say, can I have because you may not get an offer in an interview. Chances are you're not, although we have done that here before at times. Usually they're going to call you at a separate time, to have a discussion like that. But questions like that can be really awkward to put someone on the spot. And it kind of gives the impression that maybe that's what your focus is versus being able to be a successful candidate to fill the role and the work that they need done. So again, it's your audience. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to the HR rep that's talking to you about some of these things? Is it the head of the department where they're really more interested in what you can bring to the department? Maybe, you're thinking of your audience when you're asking those questions, but it's really going to vary on the situation. One of the things that I think impresses us when people ask is if they ask questions about the organization. Now, you don't want to have it seem so robotic where it's like you have this list of questions and you want to hit every single one just because you created a list. It's if they haven't covered that, if you truly want to know some of those things, maybe you're somebody like myself that really values community involvement. Maybe you're asking, tell me a little bit more about LMC's community involvement. Do they give time to volunteer annually? Is there anything like that? We do offer a day of paid work to be able to do that. So there's things like that that you can kind of indirectly learn by asking some of your questions, but just be mindful of how you ask them.
Great, thanks, Michael. Cindy, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cindy. Thanks so much for all the information. It was very, very helpful. One of the things that you said was obviously when you're in an interview, you want to be authentic and you don't want to lie and you just want to be your genuine self. But I was wondering if you could touch a little bit more on that. Like if they ask a question and that that's not your strong suit, or if they ask you about administration work or something like that, and that that's not your strong suit, but there's lots of other things in the job description that is your strong suit. How would you go about not lying and being authentic while also not just saying, oh, I'm actually horrible at that, don't give me any of that kind of work? How would you address that?
Yeah, so I for sure would not say you're horrible. I would not lead with that. So that's first thing, but there's a couple different ways. You could say, you can be honest and say, I haven't really had a ton of experience, doing this type of work. Maybe it's recruiting, maybe I'm hiring for someone on my team and I'm like, tell me about your experience with recruiting. Well, I haven't really done much of that, but I was involved in a lot of these different functions. And I had the chance to work on a couple projects where I did help, with the intern program or something. I'm just giving an example, but it may have not been full-blown recruiting where that was a big portion of my role during the year, the time I was there. But I had some projects and times I was able to work on some things. So this is kind of the extent of what I've done. But that would be maybe one of the areas that I have an opportunity to grow in going forward. But I still think based on, the scope of the job and what you're looking for, I think I can bring a lot of value in all of those other areas. This would just be one maybe that I would need some help in as I look to grow in the position. And you just don't want to lie. You want to be upfront about it, but at the same time, you're trying to sell yourself. So trying to pick things from prior experience, or if you haven't had the experience, but maybe you even had a class that maybe, I can give an example. When I started in HR, it was so difficult to find anybody that would take the first shot in giving me a job, because HR, you have to know laws, regulations, there's all these things. And it's well, this guy messes up, he could cost us a lawsuit, and they were probably right at the time for thinking that. But as somebody that was trying to find a job, I always felt stuck, I didn't have the experience. So I would talk, well, I had this class, or in this class, I had this project that helped me understand how this would work in a job. And I had an internship that gave me some experience here. So I have some foundational pieces that I think would suit me well. You can kind of approach it from that standpoint.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay. Awesome. Anybody else? I know we're over time here, but I can answer anything if anybody has anything else.
There are no more questions in the chat.
Awesome.
Really good questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for those questions. Really helpful information. Interviewing can be scary, but then you get to meet people like Michael. He's not scary.
I was just gonna
I don't
say,
know. Maybe he is in an interview. I don't know.
Honestly, the way I always tell people is like, they always say picture people like in their underwear. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is like, think about it like you're just talking to another person. And at the end of the day, you're either going to be somebody that is going to be confident in being able to do the work and feel like you're going to be able to bring something to that organization where it'll be a good fit, or likely, even going into that, yeah, I'm probably not going to meet the requirements here, and sometimes you go for jobs that maybe are above, where you're maybe at professionally, but normally you're going to have a gut feel on what it's going to be like. And just keep in mind, it's just another person or people you're talking to. So when I say authentic and being genuine, just have a conversation. That's really what they're looking for.
yeah, when I work with students, I let them know that it's no different than your first time on campus when you went to a class where all new people were, or you were walking down the sidewalk or at a group thing, where you just start with, hi, my name is this, what program are you in? It just authentically kind of starts that conversation and communication. So think of it like that. You've had tons of experiences in your lifetime about those first time moments, or when you've gone to a wedding and people say, hi, what's your name? What do you do? Have responses for that. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, but do keep in mind if they have the STAR response or asking for some of those specific ways to respond, you still want to keep that in mind, because if you just try to be conversational and don't address those things, that will not suit you well in the interview. But you can, build in being conversational into what they're asking. So always know that too as you're going into it.
Because every response isn't going to be a STAR response, just to those behavioral based questions.
Yeah. Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your time and attention today. I think this was an hour well spent. So thank you so much
Definitely.
for joining us. And thank you to Michael and for Lisa for sharing your wisdom and expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting the event.
You're very welcome.